Today, same-sex marriage is a hot topic. The controversy is sure to bring heated debate whenever it is mentioned. Often, people's opinions and emotions are blasted constantly on television. It can become hard to filter through the noise what is actually happening. I don't know about you, but I'd much rather hear from the lawmakers than from angry mobs. Today, we will take you to the legislature ourselves. Welcome to The Point. We asked our legislators 3 questions. Are you for same-sex marriage? Why or why not? Some people complained that this issue should be decided by popular vote. Is this a valid complaint? Is there any common misunderstandings regarding the wording of the bill? Are you for same-sex marriage? Why or why not?
I support it.
I'm planning to vote against the bill.
Well, I'm opposed to it.
I support legalizing same-sex marriage.
I think same-sex couples who want to get married should be allowed to get married. I've been married to my wife, my female wife, for 19 years, and I don't think it will have any effect on my marriage whatsoever. Absolutely. I think it's only fair that same-sex couples should be able to be married as well.
And let's start with the special session. This not so special session. There's no urgency here. There's no reason to do it other than it's politically motivated and driven. It's driven by a governor who's running for re-election who has low poll numbers. It's driven by members of the House and the Senate who are running for Congress in a crowded primary who are looking for new niche voters. Although my position has always been publicly that the legislature should not be involved in marriage, period. That marriage is for religious institutions and therefore we should not be involved. Go back to the constitutional amendment that we had back in 1998 when people were fooled. They thought that they were voting for traditional marriage between one man, one woman, but some of us warned at the time that the wording, and that's always the problem, the devil's in the detail, the wording left it open to the legislature. The legislature that is here in 2013 is a lot different from the one in 1998. My belief is, and our legal information is, that basically what we're doing now is unconstitutional and an aberration in terms of what the people voted for. And the people voted overwhelmingly, over 70%. My position today would be, all right, you think that things have changed and people have changed, let them vote. Let the people vote, because this is something that should not be within the purview of the legislature. If we're going to have a special session, have it on the things that we really need to address in our community: the economy, the infrastructure, education, health, and transportation. We've had 2 special sessions in the last 12 years that were not related to confirmation of judicial or other nominees. One had to do with the super ferry, one had to do with recovery after 9/11. This pales in comparison.
I think that the will of the people has kind of already been heard. Most of my district is against it, from what I can tell from the emails and phone calls that I'm getting. I think there are also some potential ramifications for the state that we haven't considered yet, so I think we haven't thought it all the way through.
I've supported it for quite some time, and I'm very happy that we're addressing the issue in Hawaii this year. I think that with the recent Supreme Court ruling, it was necessary for Hawaii to do something. So I believe it's the right thing to do from a pure civil rights issue. You know, liberty and justice for all. I mean, why should we deny anybody based on their sexual orientation? Yeah. It's the same arguments that apply to race and gender and all the other civil rights issues that have happened before. I also support it because my district has a very large gay and lesbian population. I believe it's the largest in the state. It's a very flourishing and active community. And we've got a tremendous response from constituents on this issue, people weighing in on it. We've had over 500 responses just from my district on this issue, which I believe is far more than any other issue we've seen. And I don't know how it is for other legislators, but for my district, the responses are running more than 5-1 in favor of same-gender marriage. Okay. While there are some very vocal, very passionate people who oppose it, usually for religious reasons, there's 5 times that many who support it. They're equally passionate, and their reasons are more based on civil rights and law. It may be contrary to someone's religious beliefs, But that's fine. They can follow their religious beliefs. There's no reason to deny a civil right to somebody. Freedom of religion means everyone gets freedom of religion, and our laws can't be based on someone's religious interpretation if it violates people, because it would violate other people's civil rights.
Some people complain that this issue should be decided by popular vote. Is this a valid complaint?
So if you're going to have it discussed at all, yes, let's put it to a vote as we did in 1998, but let's make the question clearer and make sure we all understand what the answer is.
Well, I mean, the Constitution clearly says that the legislature has the authority to decide to define marriage. Because any question we could kick to the voters if we wanted to. It takes a lot longer. It's more expensive. You got to go through the whole process of doing a constitutional amendment, putting it on the ballot, and all that stuff. If we have the authority, do we punt to a direct vote by the people? It's a representative democracy. I'm called a representative, and my constituents will, in the next election, they'll determine whether I represent them in the way that they wanted me to. The check on the power, on the authority on what to do is not in the person on each issue. It's the check is on the people who represent you, and whether you want to put them back in after they've done something, or one way or the other. In my case, I've supported same-sex marriage for a long time, so I think it's reasonably well known that I do support it.
I think it is valid. I think in 1998 people thought that that's what they were voting on, and it wasn't actually. I wasn't old enough to vote yet, so I didn't vote on that question, but I remember people talking about voting on it and being frustrated that it was confusing. And I think people thought that they were voting for a constitutional amendment that would keep marriage between one man and one woman. That's not what they were voting on. They were voting to give the legislature the power. But I think when people think they're voting on something, we as a legislature have to acknowledge that. I think putting it back to the people is a very valid thing to do, and that's part of the reason why I'm still against the bill.
I think it's not a valid complaint, and I have two reasons to believe that. One is legal. Many years ago, Hawaii had a constitutional amendment that was decided by the people to give the power to define marriage to the legislature. For better or worse, there was a constitutional amendment that was decided by the people that gave that power to the legislature. Even if we were to have a direct popular vote, I don't think it would have legal standing, because according to our Constitution as it stands, the power to change that lies with the legislature. I also believe that if we had a popular vote, it would pass. Gay marriage would pass this year, because I believe people's attitudes have changed dramatically. We don't have a direct voting democracy. We have a representative democracy in this country. We don't vote on individual issues, with some very rare exceptions. So this is the way our government is run on every other issue. I don't see the logic in asking for an exception on this one.
Is there any common misunderstandings regarding the wording of the bill?
Yeah, well, there's the one that I find most glaring is that. And I have to preface this by saying there's a lot of different versions of the bill floating around, so it's hard to say definitively on any particular topic. But there's a lot of misconceptions about the way the public accommodation law works. There's a public accommodation laws that basically say if you hold yourself out as a business to offer whatever service or good or whatever it is, you're a public accommodation, and as somebody who's supplying a public accommodation, you can't discriminate on certain bases, and one of those has been since 2006 sexual orientation. There's no real paradigm shift with regard to the public accommodations law. That's a very long way of saying, in a legal sense, this doesn't change very much. So there might be a couple of churches that are affected, but the vast majority of them, they will never be, because they're only married. Their own members. They don't offer themselves to the public to be in place of marriage. They don't. If you're not advertising on the web saying come to Hawaii and get married at whatever church it is, it's just not going to come up. And I think there's a very big unfounded concern that this is just going to change everything. And whatever church you are in, any gay couple can come in and say, I demand to be married here. It's just not true.
First of all, this bill has already been amended 3 times. We're up to the third revision for Senate Bill 1. It probably will be amended some more. One of the big provisions in there, and one of the sticking points, has been the so-called religious exemption. That's the exemption that would permit religious institutions and people of religion to have their own views and not be forced to do something. In my humble opinion, the religious exemption fails, as it has in other states. No matter what happens with this bill, immediately upon passage and upon signage, there will be groups like the ACLU and the atheists and the gay liberation groups who will challenge the bill on that particular point. That's what was said about reciprocal beneficiaries. That's what was said about civil unions. But the goal of the activists has always been marriage. And why? Not to prove equality, but to take away from those institutions and those people that believe in, whether you call it traditional marriage, historical marriage, whatever. They want to destroy that. That's what it's all about. They really don't, the supporters of gay marriage really don't want to have a religious exemption, and it is not a solid exemption in the bill as written right now.
A lot of the opposition that I hear about has to do with what the religious exemptions. People feel like that religious exemption has not gone far enough and has not protected church activities enough. As I understand it, the law was written to allow as broad a religious exemption as is legally possible. You know, we have various non-discrimination laws on our books, and those laws will continue to apply just as they did yesterday, so there's no getting around non-discrimination laws. In other words, if a church uses its facilities primarily for its religious activities and its members, then they don't have to accommodate a ceremony or a reception for a gay couple. If they rent out their hall to the public, then they can't discriminate against gay couples by refusing to rent out that hall. I believe that the governor, in conjunction with the Attorney General, has crafted the religious exemption as broadly as is legally possible, so it will withstand challenges. Accommodated. I think we all want to accommodate churches as much as possible. So I think there's a lot of confusion about the idea that a church will be compelled to perform gay marriages. And I believe that, in fact, the way the law is written, the churches will be protected from having to do that if they choose not to, as much as is legally possible.
Yeah, people are concerned mainly about the religious exemptions and whether or not churches would be forced to marry same-sex couples against their beliefs. In the current version of the bill, which just came out, it would appear that there are protections for the churches, some protections, but not enough. If you're a wedding photographer, there are a lot of people of faith that are wedding photographers or bakers or other things, and are you going to be required to support same-sex weddings or risk lawsuits for discrimination? And we haven't addressed that at all. That's, again, one of the reasons why I'm against the bill. We have not given enough time for public process. On Monday, the bill is going to be heard, and the bill only came out on Wednesday of this week. And it's been, they've had 6 weeks to put out a draft. And this is the first time that we're seeing the draft that we're going to hear. And I think, the religious community has not had opportunity to weigh in. What I find particularly offensive about the way it's being handled is that the deadline for testimony will be Sunday at 10:30 a.m., which means that a lot of people that would have heard about it in church maybe, the people that are promoting the bill recognize that a lot of the opposition is coming from the religious community. And the religious community, a lot of those people are not even going to see the bill because it only came out on Wednesday, and they'll only hear about it in church on Sunday, at which point it'll be a little bit late to give testimony. And to me, I find that wrong. I don't think that's part of what the public process should be.
Though our conversation on To the Point is coming to an end, the ball is now in your court. As a voter, you decide if you agree with the final decision or not. After all, these representatives represent you. The door of change is only closed until you open it.